week one. Week one is upon us with a healthy slate, a full slate of games. You know, the bye week doesn't start until week 2. That's when the bye.
Yeah.
I think it's ridiculous that they actually have a bye so early in the season.
It doesn't
for
make
some of
any
these
sense.
teams. It's useless. But okay, week one we have all the teams playing. Who are some potential explosive starts, sneaky starts that we can provide our viewers with?
Yeah, I guess we'll lead off with a kind of obvious one. I don't know. This one's talked more about in PPR than standard, but I think it has value either way. And that is one James White for the New England Patriots. The sort of the line of thinking here, the narrative that has justified this, is that Jimmy Garoppolo is awful. They'll end up behind. They won't be able to just grind it out with Blunt, which is kind of all they do with Blunt. They'll probably start trying to run the game with Blunt, keep it as this like game managing safe thing. But the Arizona offense is so good, it won't matter. It'll get blown open.
Smokey Brown.
Yeah, Smokey Brown. And then they'll have to throw it. And James White is kind of that pass-catching beneficiary. So he kind of makes this nice sneaky flex play, especially in PPR, but even in standard, depending on what your bench is. Because Jimmy Garoppolo just profiles as one of those guys that he's not going to push it downfield. It's going to be a lot of checking down, and James White is going to be one of the beneficiaries of that, especially we don't really know what's going on with Gronk. This injury is still a problem for him.
Yeah.
We don't really know his week 1 status. So James White could see a lot of targets in this game.
What about Bennett then?
Bennett too. If Gronk misses, then Bennett becomes really valuable. Bennett becomes like a maybe tight end one. I don't know. It's hard to say even with Jimmy Garoppolo.
For week 1, yeah, it's tough. But I just realized, if you take LeGarrette Blount and you take James White and then you mash them together, you have James Blunt. And it's beautiful.
There you go.
There it is.
No one's made that connection yet. James Blunt.
No, nobody has made that connection. No, but I agree. I like James White as a flex play for this week. I think game script is important here. Arizona's looked god awful in the preseason, so hopefully they turn it around.
Yeah.
For all the fantasy equity that has been poured into the Arizona offense, I think the collective fantasy community is hoping that Arizona turns it around, especially all the David Johnson owners, and we're high on John Brown. So I like Arizona's offense a lot. I think they will win this game, especially with Tom Brady being out, Gronk kind of being a little bit banged up.
Yeah.
So I think the game script does favor James White. It's going to be one of those situations, almost like in Cincinnati, where you have Jeremy Hill and Gio Bernard, but you have the much less sexy version of LeGarrette Blount and James White.
Yeah,
just James Blunt. We'll put it that way.
James Blunt is the poor man's version. Speaking of Gio Bernard, perfect
Transition
into almost the exact same story with Gio Bernard is a nice sneaky start. Because the Bengals are playing the Jets, who have a very good run defense, so Jeremy Hill will probably be bottled up. I would not be surprised if the Bengals found themselves down in this game, because I think the Jets' offense is better than it gets credit for. So I could very easily see them down. They have to throw it a lot. Gio becomes that guy. Basically, everything we said about James White, copy and paste it on a Gio Bernard. And he's someone else that you were probably considering just benching week 1 because, you took him in the late mid rounds. You're like, I don't need to start him. But he's like a very valuable, I would say flex play again. But we've seen how well he does in the games where he gets a lot of work. And this is shaking up to be one of those games.
Yeah, and if you're one of the owners that has both, if you took Jeremy Hill and Gio Bernard and then you're in that situation where like, oh my God, I have to choose. Who am I going to start? Do I start both of them or do I pick? I think this is a week where you do pick Gio Bernard.
Yeah.
I don't know if game script will play as much of a role. In comparison to the Arizona-New England game.
Yeah.
I think Cincinnati has a good team. I think they will be competitive. I think we will just see the New York defensive line kind of bottle Jeremy Hill up to the point where they might start to shift to Gio a little bit, change of pace, get him involved in the passing game. I think he will see equal touches, if not slightly more than Jeremy Hill in week 1. which goes against the narrative that Jeremy Hill is going to have this revival. I still think it's viable for later in the season. I just think that week 1 might not be the time. So fire up your Gio Bernard as a flex, a sneaky flex. Definitely in a 12-man league, you should be flexing Gio Bernard. That's our take, at least.
Yeah, I like it.
I like it.
And
Who's next?
Yeah, to transition that to the same game, but a different part of the field, I'm going to hype up a man whose name has been completely unmentioned in the fantasy community, and that is one...
I already know who you're talking about.
That is one Brandon LaFell.
Brandon LaFell.
Part of this is because he's gone just completely unmentioned, and it's like, well, hey, why not Brandon LaFell? You know, he is the number 2 guy there.
But Tyler Boyd.
Tyler Boyd is a rookie. Thank you for asking. Tyler Boyd is a rookie, and he's not going to have an impact week 1. I'm trying to like look up this stat as I give my take, and it's not working.
But Brandon LaFell 2 years ago put up big numbers. He put up wide receiver 2 numbers as part of the New England Patriots. He was that deep threat for Tom Brady. He was supposed to be that last year, but he had a little bit of a problem with the dropsies when he came back off the put. So he kind of fell into this pit of fantasy irrelevance, which is where he is now. I think a lot of people forgot that he even existed.
Yeah.
He is listed as the wide receiver 2 for Cincinnati.
He's listed as the wide receiver 2. I was trying to find a split on AJ Green when he plays Darrelle Revis, and for some reason I can't find it. But he's going up against Revis, and for all accounts, Revis is still this shutdown corner.
Revis Island.
Revis Island. So if Revis can shut down AJ Green, then that leaves Brandon LaFell as the main beneficiary. There is a version where Brandon LaFell gets peppered with targets, and he has this monster week 1 that he then doesn't reproduce the rest of the season. But that's my he's probably more of a DFS play than anything else.
Yeah, I was just gonna say. Yeah,
that's kind of really where he lines up. But I guess if you're sitting there, I don't know how you're sitting there week 1, mining the waiver wire.
Yeah.
But if you're maybe it's like a really deep league, like a 16-team league that starts like 5 wide receivers. Brandon LaFell's your guy.
A very specific take here. If you're in a 16-team league that starts 24 wide receivers, definitely pick up Brandon LaFell.
I just wanted to make sure it was said, because no one else in the world has said it, and I need this to be a bench stash take. So when it happens, we can be like, look, we said it.
I think maybe it's like a preemptive waiver wire pickup. I don't know if you want to fire him up for week 1. That might be a bit risky, unless you're really, really shallow at the wide receiver position. If you're dealing with okay, you went robust or something, or the draft fell that way, and you're just stacked with running backs, and you're sitting there like, who do I put in my wide receiver 2 spot? Brandon LaFell is somebody that you could potentially start, but I think more realistically, he's probably on the waiver wire, and you can just, if you have the space, you can go pick him up before week 1, so that if he explodes like a diaper, you maybe offer him to a wide receiver needy team, or you just sit on him, because he is a wide receiver 2 behind AJ Green as of now.
Yeah, that could prove to be a valuable spot. Who knows? To move to a different game, we've talked enough about Brandon LaFell.
Yes.
We're now going to move to Giants Cowboys to discuss 2 different Gigantes. Gigantes. We'll lead off.
I'm going to start with. I'm excited.
With one Rashad Jennings.
Love me some Rashad Jennings this year.
Rashad. For the last 4 weeks of last season, his fantasy point totals were 12, 15, 15, and 25 fantasy points. He was the goal line back. He didn't have less than 16 touches in any of these games. He kind of became like the bell cow back. So it's a little bit of assumption to assume he'll keep doing that, but I don't think it's an unfair assumption against what is a truly terrible defense.
That's terrible, man.
Terrible. So Rashad is someone that you might have drafted in the 8th round who you were just going to let sit on your bench, but I think if you have him, you should be starting him.
Yeah, he's definitely a viable flex play this week. They went out, they waived Andre Williams, who was supposedly the only real threat to Rashad Jennings. Mm-hmm. So now he's basically the standalone feature back. Outside of Vereen as a pass catching back, but Rashad will probably get 20 touches. I mean, that's kind of been McAdoo's MO. I mean, he kind of came in last season and said, okay, this running back by committee business, it hasn't been working. I'm just going to give the ball to Rashad. We saw what he did at the end of the season, and now he's the guy. I think it's unfair to assume that he'll get hurt right off the bat. He has shown some weakness in that area, but I mean, right now, I think he's definitely a viable starting running back. Potential league winner if he stays healthy, because he probably was drafted in like the 7th or 8th round.
Yeah, he definitely has that ceiling if he can stay healthy the whole season. If not, then he's one of these guys you sell once you get scared enough of the injuries. But I think this first month of the season, he's going to start out pretty hot.
Yeah,
hot.
And in that same game,
we have one Sterling Shepard. I consider throwing out Odell Beckham, but that's like an obvious. There's nothing sneaky about that. That's I guess more of a DFS guy. But Sterling Shepard is the de facto number 2 receiver there. As I said before, the Cowboys defense is terrible. No pass rush to speak of after the round of suspensions that happened. Eli's going to have all day to throw. The corners and safeties are bad. So
just railing on Dallas.
Just railing on them. And they're probably going to double cover Odell just to try and slow him down any way they can. Potentially leaving Shep in single coverage. And even if he is a rookie, he's supposed to be one of the more polished rookies, one of the better route runners. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see Shep have this kind of explosive week 1. He's another guy that you probably drafted planning to just sit on your bench. But if you can fit him into your flex or even your wide receiver 2 spot, I'd recommend it.
Fire him up. Yeah. We saw Dallas contain Odell in both the matchups last season. Mm-hmm. So he's obviously, I mean, when you're game planning for New York, you're focusing on Odell Beckham. So Shep might be kind of left to that single coverage, that soft coverage, where he could exploit that, especially like you just said, he's kind of this polished rookie, kind of like Amari Cooper was last year. I don't think he's in the same conversation, but he's a good route runner. He is in a dynamic offense. I guess we can call New York a dynamic offense. They'll be throwing the ball a lot. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think what's going to happen to back the narrative of choosing both Rashad and Shep in this game is that New York will probably jump to a lead with Shep catching 2 touchdown passes. And then the rest of the game, they're just feeding Rashad. That's how this game is going to play out. So both of those players will be viable fantasy starters.
There's definitely that way.
One player I want to talk about who was also drafted in the mid to late rounds.
Let's hear it.
Oh, shit.
Oh.
Who's that?
Derek Carr's popping up.
Derek Carr made his return.
He was
not
drafted.
Derek Carr. Yeah, Derek Carr is not who I'm about to be talking about, but it is one Michael Crabtree. If you follow our Twitter, I've been beating this drum for a while because I think it's absurd that Amari Cooper is drafted in the 2nd or 3rd round and Crabtree is drafted in the 8th round. I would take Crabtree any day of the week, and I love Cooper. I think he's kind of this generational talent at wide receiver and that he'll continue to improve. But in terms of fantasy production this year, you have to look at the rapport he has with Derek Carr, which is why, let's just bring him back. So last year, I tweeted this out about a week ago, but out of the receivers that had 140 targets, and this might surprise some people, and that had at least 8 touchdowns, the list is very short.
Here we go.
Julio Jones.
Okay.
Antonio Brown, elite.
Who dat?
DeAndre Hopkins.
Okay.
Supposedly elite.
Supposedly.
Brandon Marshall, elite.
Okay.
Odell Beckham Jr., elite.
Elite.
Allen Robinson, maybe newly elite.
Maybe
I don't know.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see on that one. Calvin Johnson, elite but retired.
Once elite.
And Michael Crabtree.
Oh, shit. What is he doing on that list?
What is he doing on that list?
How did he get there?
What? Why is he being drafted in the 8th round?
What?
Yeah, he had 140 targets, more than 140 targets last year, which I don't think a lot of people realize. And he had 9 touchdowns. So he was incredibly productive. A lot of people will talk about, he faded down the stretch. But that was more indicative of Oakland's whole offense slowing down. I mean, they were banged up. They lost some key pieces of their offensive line, which is now newly bolstered with some huge bodies.
Yeah.
And you just look, I mean, as soon as the Raiders signed Crabtree last offseason and he went down to Bakersfield and worked out with Derek Carr, they had this instant connection, especially in the red zone, where Carr feels more comfortable throwing the ball to Michael Crabtree. At this stage, he hasn't quite found the rhythm yet with Amari Cooper. I think Cooper's talented enough to make up for it in a fantasy sense, but I think Crabtree will probably mirror Amari Cooper's production. And if you look at it that way, and if you're going to start Amari Cooper, if you feel comfortable starting Amari Cooper, then you should feel comfortable starting Michael Crabtree, because I think Crabtree will put up the same numbers. Maybe even, I guess it would be hot takey if I said Crabtree will outproduce Amari Cooper, but he did. He outproduced him last season. So I'm going to go ahead and say, I'm going to say Michael Crabtree will outproduce Amari Cooper this season.
Damn.
And you're talking a 6-round difference in ADP. So if you have Michael Crabtree on your team, fire him up in week 1, especially because New Orleans has a porous defense. And I think that game will just be a shootout, to be honest. I think Oakland's defense is improved, but week 1 in Nolans, they'll probably kind of get lit up a little bit. I think we have to expect that. So I think it's just going to be, offensive battle with Derek Carr, Drew Brees slanging it. So, yeah, Michael Crabtree is a must-start for me this week, either as a wide receiver 2 or a flex. So don't leave him on your bench or you will regret it, because he will catch 16 touchdown passes.
Wow, that's the take right there.
Bench dash take.
Bench stash take.
Bam!